Welcome to the Explainer. Let's just be real for a second. If you've set foot in an airport recently, you already know the game has totally changed. It's wild out there. The rules are way stricter, the prices are frankly sky high, and the fine print, yeah, it's getting nearly impossible to decipher. But hey, don't sweat it, because today we are on a mission to decode this chaotic new landscape. We're going to break down exactly what you need to know to actually survive and maybe even thrive on your next trip. So let's just dive right in. But first, picture your typical pre-flight routine for a second. You finally sit down at the gate, you pull out your phone, and you maybe start watching a quick video or catching up on some voice notes. Standard stuff, right? Well, could that simple, everyday action literally ruin your entire trip? The absolutely crazy answer is yes. Innocent mistakes with the tech we use every single day can now trigger some seriously severe consequences, and we're talking before the plane even leaves the tarmac. So, think of this as our flight itinerary for today's Explainer. First, we'll look at the cost of booking. Second, those incredibly confusing fares and hidden fees. Third, the shrinking refund window. Fourth, some very strict new cabin rules. And finally, number 5, surviving flight cancellations. Let's get moving. All right, Section 1, the cost of booking, why prices aren't dropping. Pretty much every traveler right now gets that massive sticker shock when they go to search for a flight. So the question on everyone's mind is naturally, why are ticket prices staying so high? Listen, if you've been holding out, just waiting and hoping for airfares to drop before you book that vacation, you are probably going to be waiting a really long time. The harsh reality is that airline operating costs have completely skyrocketed. Just to put this in perspective, Delta Airlines recently saw their quarterly fuel bill hit a staggering $4.4 billion. That's a 77% spike compared to the previous year. But here's the wild part. Despite those massive costs, they still posted their highest quarterly revenue ever. So why exactly aren't prices coming down? Well, you really have to listen to the corporate jargon they use to explain this. Delta's CEO, Ed Bastian, recently called this current pricing environment a structural reset. Let me just put my corporate translator hat on for a second. A structural reset basically means these high prices, yeah, they are the new permanent normal. This isn't just some temporary blip or a knee-jerk reaction to fuel prices. Even if oil prices drop tomorrow, the cost of your ticket probably won't. The airlines are just passing those costs straight down to us, the consumers. And the real reason airlines have absolutely zero incentive to lower those prices, it all comes down to demand. Get this, on July 23rd, there were over 150,000 global flights in the air in a single day. 150,000. That made it literally the busiest day ever recorded in aviation history. So despite these massive price tags, and let's be honest, some of the worst delay reliability we've seen in years, demand is still through the roof. People are flying. And as long as we keep buying tickets at these prices, airlines have absolutely no reason to discount them. Moving on to Section 2, confusing fares and hidden fees. Welcome to the booking maze. So let's say you swallow your pride, accept the high prices, and go to book your tickets. You immediately walk into a deliberately confusing landscape. Remember when it used to be just economy, business, or first class? So simple. Now, airlines are just slapping completely made-up names on their fare tiers. United recently rolled out a stripped-down tier called Basic Business. I mean, it sounds fancy, right? But actually, scratch that, it basically means no business. You get no seat selection, only one checked bag instead of 2, and absolutely zero lounge access. Southwest Airlines, a company that used to literally pride itself on being simple, now makes you pick between Basic Choice, Choice Preferred, and Choice Extra. Air Canada is doing the exact same thing, taking what used to be just standard everyday perks and turning them into pricey add-ons. It is practically a maze designed to make it as hard as possible for you to figure out what you're actually paying for. Oh, and to make matters worse, it's about to get even harder to figure out the true cost of your flight. Recently, 6 major airlines, we're talking heavy hitters like American, Delta, and United, actually sued the Department of Transportation to block a 2024 rule. Now, this rule would have required airlines to show you baggage and change fees right up front when you first search for a flight. But because the airlines won the lawsuit, the DOT had to reverse the rule, basically rolling back disclosure requirements to these super loose standards from all the way back in 2011. So on top of trying to decode the confusing fare names, airlines don't even have to show you the full cost of your trip until you click all the way through to that final checkout page. Which brings us to Section 3, the shrinking refund window, or as I like to call it, buyer's remorse.
Say you finally buy that ticket, you navigate all the hidden fees, and then, you realize you made a mistake. Well, you better act fast, because the refund window is shrinking fast. American Airlines quietly, and I mean very quietly, tighten up their 24-hour refund policy just before July 13th, 2026. It used to be that if you booked a flight at least 2 days before departure, you could cancel it within 24 hours of booking and get a full, no questions asked refund. Awesome, right? But now, that 24-hour window only applies if you book the flight at least 7 days before departure. They took their generous policy and dropped it down to the absolute bare minimum required by federal law. And most major airlines are now following this strict 7-day rule, catching a whole lot of travelers completely off guard. All right, Section 4, strict new cabin rules. Time for boarding the plane. We are now officially stepping onto the aircraft, and once you set foot in that cabin, you are subject to some highly strict, brand new in-flight rules that dictate exactly how you can act. And the penalties for breaking them? Not a joke. We are not just talking about a flight attendant giving you a stern look. If you violate certain updated contracts of carriage, you could be denied boarding, literally physically removed from your seat, or in the worst-case scenario, receive a permanent lifetime ban from the airline. So what incredibly terrible act triggers that kind of punishment? The crime is literally just playing audio or video on your phone without headphones. Yup, United Airlines recently rewrote their contract of carriage just to include this specific rule. If you are blasting a tic-tac or listening to a podcast on your phone speaker, United now has the full legal right to kick you off the plane. And they didn't even stop there. Voice and video calls are also entirely banned the very second those cabin doors close, even if you do have headphones on. But honestly, this next one might be my favorite new rule. You've got to hear this. United, Delta, and Southwest have now officially banned humanoid and animal-like robots from both the cabin and checked luggage. No way, right? Yes, you heard me. This whole bizarre rule actually traces back to a robot named Stewie, who bought a ticket and flew in an actual passenger seat on a Southwest flight from Vegas to Dallas. Now, while it's kind of hilarious, the airlines actually have a super practical reason for this. They aren't worried about the robot, becoming self-aware and taking over the plane. They're terrified of the massive batteries, all the moving parts, and the crazy wiring that ground crews are absolutely not trained to handle if there's an emergency. It's a perfect example of airlines having to scramble and write rules for tech that barely even existed a few years ago. And that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, surviving flight cancellations, the absolute worst-case scenario. So when the system completely breaks down and you're staring at a worst-case scenario in the terminal, you quickly realize that mass disruptions are shockingly common right now. Just to give you an idea, a single storm system in mid-March caused over 12,500 flight delays and cancellations across the U.S., and that's just one isolated event. We saw Winter Storm Fern wipe out 11,000 flights in January, and American Airlines just recently had nationwide tech outages that literally grounded every single departure in the country. If you travel even a moderate amount, getting caught up in a mass cancellation event is really no longer an if, it is absolutely a when. So, the most absolutely crucial thing is knowing exactly how to react. When a mass cancellation hits, you need to execute these 3 steps immediately. First, accept reality. If the delay is weather-related, airlines consider it an uncontrollable event. That means they have zero legal obligation to pay for your overnight hotel. Second, whatever you do, stop waiting in that massive line at the customer service desk to get rebooked. The longer you stand there, the worse your situation is getting. Third, pull out your phone and book a nearby hotel immediately. We saw one documented instance in our source material where a traveler tried to sort out their flight first. By the time they finally did, every single hotel within a 10-mile radius was totally sold out. They got stuck paying hundreds of dollars for a room 40 minutes away from the airport. The golden rule is this: when the board flashes red, secure your bed first, then figure out your flight. Okay, so we've covered the sky-high fares, the confusing booking mazes, shrinking refund windows, super strict new cabin rules, and how to survive mass cancellations. It paints a pretty intense picture of what modern air travel really looks like today. So I want to leave you with this one thought. With prices rising, fees hiding, and rules tightening up across the board, who really holds the power on your next flight? The airlines have clearly structured this whole industry to their massive advantage, which means at the end of the day, it is entirely up to you to stay vigilant, always read the fine print, and know exactly what your rights are before you ever step foot inside an airport. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay sharp out there and safe travels.